Clara Whitmore drove her mother's wedding ring into her palm until it drew blood, because pain was the only thing keeping her upright. Behind those church doors, half the town of Dry Hollow was packed shoulder to shoulder, waiting to watch her marry the most feared man in Montana. A monster, folks called him. A killer who slept with wolves. And her own father had sold her to him before sunrise to cover a gambling debt. She counted her 2 starving brothers in the back pew. Then she stepped across the threshold, because a woman with nothing left still had one choice left, and this was hers. If this story already has a hold on you, go on and tap that subscribe button and ring the bell so the rest don't pass you by. And before you settle in for the long haul, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these Old West stories travel. Now let's ride back to Dry Hollow, Montana, the summer of 1878. The morning Clara Whitmore walked into a church that felt a whole lot more like a gallows. Clara Whitmore had not slept. She sat on the edge of her dead mother's bed with her hands folded in her lap, the faded blue dress already fastened at her throat, the hem darned 3 times over where her brothers had stepped on it as children. She counted the stitches because counting was the only thing keeping her from walking out the back door and into the Montana scrub forever. Her father's boots scraped in the hallway. "Clara." She did not answer. "Clara, the wagon's outside. He's outside." "Let him wait. He don't strike me as a waitin' man." "Then he'll learn." Walter Whitmore pushed the door open. He had shaved badly. A nick on his jaw was still bleeding into his collar. He looked at his daughter, and for a moment his face broke the way a man's face breaks when he finally understands what he has done. Then he pulled the pieces back together, because the alternative was to fall apart where she could see him. "It's time," he said. "Is it?" "Clara, please. Don't start again, Pa. I already heard it. I heard it 3 times between midnight and the rooster. I don't need a 4th. I did what I had to. You did what you wanted to. There's a difference, and you just ain't ready to admit it." He flinched like she'd slapped him. Behind him in the kitchen, 9-year-old Thomas stood on a chair at the wash basin scrubbing Ben's face with a rag. Ben, 7 years old, and small for it was trying not to cry. He had been told in no uncertain terms that crying would only make it worse for Clara. He was doing his level best. Clara stood. She walked past her father without touching him and crossed to the kitchen. "Tom?" "Yes, ma'am." "Look at me, honey." Tom turned. His eyes were red. "You take care of Ben, you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "You listen to Pa on the things that won't kill you, and you think for yourself on everything else. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Ben's chin trembled. "Are you coming back, Clara?" Clara knelt. The hem of the dress caught on a nail in the floorboards and tore another inch. She didn't notice. "I don't know yet, honey." "But Pa said you was getting married." "I am." "Then why wouldn't you come back?" She laid her forehead against his. She held it there long enough that Walter Whitmore had to turn away and press his fist against the doorframe because he could not watch his own daughter say the thing she was about to say. "Because I don't know him yet," Clara said. "And when you don't know a person, you can't promise where you'll be." "Is he mean, Clara?" "Folks say so." "Is he, though?" Clara closed her eyes. "I reckon we're about to find out." She kissed Ben's forehead. She kissed Tom's. She stood up and she walked out of the kitchen, and she did not look back because if she looked back she was going to run, and if she ran she did not know where her legs would carry her. Walter followed at a distance. The wagon was waiting in the yard. A single figure sat in the driver's seat. Broad shoulders. Long coat despite the heat. A hat tipped so low she could not see his face. The man did not get down to help her up. He said quiet without looking at her. "Ma'am?" Clara set her jaw. She climbed up on her own. "Morning," she said. "Morning." That was the extent of the conversation for a mile and a half. The church sat on the east end of Dry Hollow's only street, and by the time the wagon rolled to a stop, every living soul in town had found a reason to be standing outside of it. The barber was sweeping the same patch of boardwalk he had already swept twice. The blacksmith was pretending to examine a horseshoe. 3 women from the Ladies' Temperance Union were pretending to pray. Nobody was pretending very well. Nate Mercer set the brake. "Ma'am." "Yes. I can walk you in, or I can walk in behind you. Your choice." Clara turned her head. It was the first time she had properly looked at him. His face was weathered sun-dark with a long scar running from the edge of his left eye down into his beard. His eyes were gray. Not cold gray, tired gray. The gray of a man who had already seen what he was afraid of and had learned to live with it standing in his doorway. "Behind me," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She climbed down before he could offer a hand. She did not know if he would have offered one. She did not want to find out. The crowd parted. Not out of respect, out of curiosity. They wanted a clean view. "Lord have mercy," one of the temperance women whispered loud enough for half the street to catch. "He brought her. He paid for her is what he did." "Hush, Martha." "I will not hush. Walter Whitmore sold his own flesh and—" "Hush," I said. Clara kept walking. Her chin was up. Not because she felt proud, because the only other option was to let it drop, and she had decided somewhere between midnight and morning that she was not going to give this town that satisfaction. The doors of the church stood open. Inside, every pew was packed. Ranchers she had grown up beside. Saloon girls she had nodded to on Saturdays. Miners who had never set foot in a pew in their lives sitting there now with their hats in their laps because a scandal had finally given them a reason to act like Christians. The preacher was already at the altar. His Bible was open in his hands. His face was the color of skim milk. "Miss Whitmore." "Reverend, are you here of your own accord?" The church went silent. Behind her, Clara could feel Nate Mercer stop walking. She could feel him waiting on her answer. She could feel the whole building holding its breath. "Ask me that again when this is over, Reverend," she said, "and I'll tell you the truth. Right now, I just need you to read the words." The preacher swallowed hard. "Miss Whitmore." "Read the words, Reverend." He read the words. Nate Mercer stood beside her at the altar, and he did not touch her. He did not touch her when the preacher asked them to turn toward each other. He did not touch her when the preacher spoke of holy matrimony. He did not touch her when the preacher asked for the ring, and Nate produced a plain silver band from his coat pocket, and the preacher asked him to place it on her finger. Nate looked at the ring. Then he looked at Clara. "Ma'am," he said, "may I?" It was the quietest question she had ever been asked. Clara stared at him. "Pardon, may I place the ring?" You're asking." "Yes, ma'am." The church heard him. Every pew heard him. A woman in the third row coughed into her glove because she did not know what else to do with her face. Clara held out her hand. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. His hand was steady. His fingers were calloused. He did not linger. The preacher cleared his throat. "Do you, Nathaniel Mercer, take Clara Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" "I do." The preacher turned. "Do you, Clara Whitmore, take Nathaniel Mercer to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health till death do you part?" Clara's mouth went dry. She saw Tom and Ben in the back pew. Tom was staring at the floor. Ben was staring at her. Ben had his small hand pressed flat against his chest, the way she had taught him to press it, when he was scared to feel his own heart beating and remember he was still there. She thought of Silas Vane, whom she had never properly met, but whose name her father had spoken last night with the particular reverence a man uses for the devil. She thought of the debt. She thought of her brothers eating dirt by Christmas. "I do." The preacher exhaled. He had not realized he had been holding his breath. He drew himself up for the final line, the one he had delivered at every wedding in Dry Hollow for the last 18 years. "You may kiss the bride." The church leaned forward as one body. Nate Mercer did not move. He stood perfectly still. He looked at Clara. He saw her hands shaking at her sides. He saw the pulse hammering in her throat. He saw the way her eyes had gone flat, the way an animal's eyes go flat when it has decided the trap is closed and fighting will only break its teeth. He took one step closer. Clara flinched. It was small. She tried to hide it, but he saw it, and the whole front row saw it, and the preacher saw it, and something in Nate Mercer's face changed in a way that none of them had expected, and none of them would ever quite be able to describe afterward. He leaned in. He did not kiss her mouth. He brushed his lips once against her forehead, a thing so light it could not rightly be called a kiss in any way the town understood the word. Then he put his mouth close to her ear, and he spoke just loud enough for her to hear and loud enough barely for the first pew to catch. "Nobody owns you now," he said. "Not your father, not the debt, not Silas Vane, and not me." He stepped back. The church did not breathe. Clara stared at him. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Somewhere in the fourth pew a woman began to cry. Not the wailing kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes out of a woman who has been married 40 years to a man who never once asked her anything at all. The preacher had frozen with his Bible half closed. I pronounce you... Pronounce it Reverend, Nate said, without taking his eyes off Clara. Go on. Husband and wife. Nate tipped his hat to Clara the way a stranger tips a hat to a lady he has just met on the boardwalk. Ma'am. Then he turned and walked down the aisle, not taking her arm, not reaching for her hand, leaving her space to follow at whatever pace she chose, or not to follow at all. Clara stood at the altar. The church was still not breathing. She found her brothers in the back pew. Ben had his hand on his chest. Tom was staring at her now, his mouth open a little. She walked. She walked down the aisle alone. She did not hurry. She did not dawdle. She passed the Ladies' Temperance Union who could not meet her eyes. She passed her father standing near the back, who could not meet them either. She passed the saloon girl, Mabel Greer, who reached out and squeezed her wrist as she went by and whispered, "Good girl." She walked out into the sun. Nate Mercer was already at the wagon. He had not mounted. He was standing beside it, with his hat in his hand, waiting. Clara stopped on the church steps. "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am." "What did you just do in there?" "Said what needed saying." "In front of the whole town?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" He considered the question. He turned his hat in his hands. "Because a man who whispers that kind of thing in private is a liar, ma'am. If I meant it, I had to say it where folks could hear." "Did you mean it?" "Yes, ma'am." "All of it?" "All of it." Clara looked at him. Her fists were clenched so hard the silver ring was cutting into her finger. "You don't know me, Mr. Mercer." "No, ma'am." "You paid my father's debt." "Yes, ma'am." "You took me out of my house at dawn." "Yes, ma'am." "And now you're telling me in front of my kin and half the town that you don't own me." "That's right." "Then what am I, Mr. Mercer?" He put his hat back on. He adjusted the brim. "A woman leaving a church, ma'am. Same as you were walking in, only now you got a ring on and a debt gone." "And if I turn around right now and walk back in there?" "Then you turn around." "And if I tell my father I ain't going with you?" "Then you ain't going with me." "And if I stay?" He looked at her a long moment. "Then we ride, ma'am." Clara's eyes filled. She did not let them spill. She had not cried in the church. She was not going to cry on the church steps for this town to watch. "Where are we riding to?" "My cabin, high country, 2 days northeast." "And what happens when we get there?" "You take the bed. I take the floor by the door. I cook what I know how. You eat what you want. You tell me what you need and I'll get it if I can. When the weather breaks in the fall, you tell me where you want to go next. I'll take you there." "That's not a marriage." "No, ma'am." "Then what is it?" "A promise, ma'am. Till you figure out what you want it to be." Behind them, the church doors were still open. The town was still watching. Her father had not come out. Her brothers had not come out either. Clara Whitmore, 20 years old, daughter of a broken gambler wife of the most feared man in Montana, for the last 4 minutes, stood on the church steps of Dry Hollow and understood for the first time in her living memory that she was being asked a question instead of told an answer. She walked down the steps. She walked past him. She climbed up into the wagon seat on her own, the way she had climbed up on her own that morning. Then she looked down at him. "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am." "Get in the wagon." "Yes, ma'am." He climbed up. He picked up the reins. He clicked his tongue. The horses stepped forward. The wagon rolled past the staring blacksmith and the staring barber, and the staring temperance women, and the staring saloon girls, and the staring children, who did not understand what they had seen, but would remember it the rest of their natural lives. Nate Mercer did not look back at the town. Clara did. Clara. She looked once over her shoulder at the open church doors. She saw her father's shadow in the doorway, not coming out. She saw the back pew where her brother sat. She saw Ben lift his small hand and press it flat against his chest. She pressed her own hand flat against hers. Then she turned forward. They rode for a long time without speaking. The road bent east, toward the foothills. The pines thickened. The country changed from dust and storefronts to something older and harder, and in its own stubborn way, more honest. Finally, without looking at her, Nate Mercer said, "Ma'am." "Yes." "You flinched in there." "I know. I noted it. I know. I'll keep noting it, every day, till the day you don't flinch anymore, and then I'll note that too." Clara did not answer. She looked down at the silver ring on her finger. She turned it once slowly with her thumb. It caught the sunlight, and the cut on her palm where she had driven the ring in that morning had already scabbed over. Nate Mercer kept his eyes on the road. "One more thing, ma'am." "What's that?" "Silas Vane." Clara's head came up. "What about him?" "He don't know yet." "Don't know what?" "That the debt's paid, that you're married, any of it. By sundown he will, and when he does, he ain't going to take it kindly." "How do you know?" Nate was quiet a long moment. His hands tightened on the reins. "Because I know Silas Vane, ma'am. Better'n I ever wanted to." Clara studied the side of his face. The scar. The gray eyes. The jaw set hard against something she could not yet name. "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am, when you stood there this morning and said nobody owns me, did you mean Silas Vane most of all?" He did not turn his head. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I meant him most of all." The wagon rolled on. The town of Dry Hollow fell away behind them, small and mean, and already beginning to spin the story it would tell about this morning for the next 20 years. The high country rose ahead, and somewhere up there past 2 days of pine and scree and narrowing trail was a cabin Clara Whitmore had never seen belonging to a man she had married that morning without knowing the first true thing about him. She did not know what she was riding toward. She only knew what she was riding away from. For the first time since her father had come home the night before with a whiskey bottle in one hand and a debt in the other, Clara Whitmore felt something in her chest that was not fear. She did not have a name for it yet. She decided she was in no hurry to find one. The wagon climbed for most of 2 days, and in all that time, Nate Mercer said maybe 40 words, and Clara Whitmore counted every one. "You warm enough, ma'am?" "I'm fine. Water's in the canteen behind you." "I know. We'll stop at the creek by dusk." "All right." By the second afternoon, Clara had stopped bracing every time the wagon hit a rut. By the second evening, she had stopped checking the angle of the sun against his rifle. By the time the trail narrowed to a single track and the pines closed in overhead, she had stopped pretending she was going to jump off and run. There was nowhere to run to. That was part of it. The other part, the part she did not yet want to look at straight on, was that the man beside her had not once raised his voice, had not once reached for her, had not once done a single thing a monster was supposed to do. It was making her nervous in a different way. "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am." "When we get to this cabin of yours?" "Yes, ma'am." "Are there other folks up there?" "No, ma'am." "Nobody?" "Not for 11 miles. 11 miles in which direction?" "All of them." Clara pressed her lips together. "That's supposed to scare me." "No, ma'am. Supposed to answer the question you asked." The cabin came into view near sundown on the second day. One room, stone chimney, a lean-to for the horse, a split-rail fence that had seen better winters. Nate set the brake and climbed down and walked around to her side of the wagon without reaching up. "Ma'am, you want to sit a minute, you sit. You want to come down, I'll stand clear." "I'll come down." She came down on her own. He carried her trunk inside. She followed him as far as the doorway, no farther. He set the trunk at the foot of a narrow bed against the far wall. A quilt was folded at the end of it. The quilt was clean. So were the floorboards. So was everything. Clara had not expected clean. "Bed's yours," Nate said, walking back out past her without touching the frame of the door. "I'll bunk by the stove." "On the floor." "Yes, ma'am." "For how long?" He paused on the porch. "For however long, ma'am." He went out to unhitch the horse. Clara stood in the doorway of a one-room cabin 11 miles from the nearest living soul, and she did something she had promised herself on the church steps she would not do. She cried. Not loud, not long. Just standing there with one hand against the doorframe, shoulders shaking twice, while Nate Mercer, out by the lean-to, kept his back turned and took a great deal longer than necessary to loosen a harness buckle. When he came back in, she was dry-eyed and standing by the stove. "You hungry, ma'am?" "Some." "Beans and salt pork is what there is tonight." "That'll do?" He cooked. She watched his hands. He had good hands for a man folks said had killed 3 in one night. They were careful hands. The hands of somebody who had learned the cost of being careless. They ate at a small table with 2 chairs. He did not say grace. Neither did she. Halfway through the plate, she set her fork down. "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am?" "Why me?" He looked up. "Pardon. You said at the altar you paid my father's debt. There's 100 debts in Dry Hollow. Why mine?" He chewed. He swallowed. He put his fork down too. "Ma'am, you sure you want that answer tonight?" "I'd rather have it tonight than wonder on it till morning." "All right." He laid both hands flat on the table. "Silas Vane came into the saloon 4 nights back. I was at the bar. He wasn't drinking. He was telling Dan Moss, the bartender, about a girl. About how her daddy was into him for $300, and how her daddy wasn't going to pay, and how he, Silas, had already worked out how he was going to collect." Clara's hand went to her throat. "He didn't use your name, ma'am. He used your father's. Walter Whitmore's oldest girl, he said. 20. Dark hair. Quiet. Said you'd be quiet about it too, because quiet girls mostly are." "Stop." "You asked?" "I know I did. Keep going." "He laughed, ma'am. He laughed when he said it. And Dan Moss, who ain't a brave man, laughed with him. Because Silas owns the cattle, and the cattle feed the town, and a man who don't laugh at Silas Vane's jokes don't eat that winter." "Did you laugh?" "No, ma'am." "What did you do?" "I finished my whiskey. I walked out. I went to your daddy's place the next morning before the sun was up. I told him what I heard. And I told him the debt was mine now if he'd sign it over, and the girl was hers. Not Silas's, not his, not mine. And he signed. He signed before I finished the sentence, ma'am." Clara put her face in her hands. She did not cry this time. She was past crying. She was somewhere colder. "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am?" "My father sold me to you because you asked him to." "He sold you to me because the alternative was Silas, ma'am, and he knew it. He knew it before you ever walked in the door." Nate did not answer. The silence was the answer. She lifted her face. "Then why the wedding? Why not just pay the debt and leave me at home?" "Because a paid debt don't stop Silas Vane, ma'am. A paid debt makes him angrier. The only thing he respects is property, and the only property in this country he won't steal is another man's wife." "So you married me to make me property." "I married you to put a law between you and him. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes, ma'am. Because property don't get to ride off in the fall. You do." Clara stared at him a long time across the table. "You talk like a preacher sometimes, Mr. Mercer." "I ain't one." "I know you ain't. I'm saying you talk like one." "Ma'am, if I'm talking like a preacher, it's 'cause I had a lot of quiet years to figure out what I wanted to say when it counted." She let that sit. Then quiet. "You said $300. Yes, ma'am? My father told me 75. Nate didn't move. My father told me $75, Mr. Mercer. Said he was behind 3 months on the feed store and one bad hand of faro. I know what he told you, ma'am. You paid $300. Yes, ma'am. Where does a mountain trapper get $300? He picked up his fork. He set it down again. Ma'am, that's a longer story than tonight has room for. Try me. Another night. Mr. Mercer, another night, ma'am. I'll tell it. I give you my word, but not tonight. Tonight, you already got more in your head than a body's meant to carry in one sitting. Clara looked at him. All right, she said. Another night. He nodded once. They finished the plates in silence. He washed. She dried. She did not ask him to let her help. She just picked up the rag. He did not thank her. He just moved over to give her room at the basin. It was the first thing they did together as a married couple, and neither of them remarked on it, and both of them noticed. That night, Clara lay in the bed against the far wall, with the quilt pulled to her chin, and Nate Mercer lay on a bedroll on the floor by the stove with his rifle within arm's reach, and the door bolted, and neither of them slept for a long time. Around midnight, she said into the dark, Mr. Mercer. Ma'am? If I'd said no this morning, in the church, if I'd said no when the preacher asked. Yes, ma'am. What would you have done? A long pause. I'd have paid the debt anyway, ma'am, and I'd have ridden back up here alone, and I'd have been a man who tried and failed, which is a better thing to be than most. You'd have left me with him. I'd have left you with your choice, ma'am. There's a difference. She was quiet a long while. Mr. Mercer. Ma'am. Thank you. Ain't nothing to thank me for yet, ma'am. Go to sleep. She slept. The days that followed did not look like a marriage. They looked like two strangers figuring out how to share a room without bumping each other. He rose before her. He had coffee on by the time she sat up. He stepped outside while she dressed. He came back in when she called. They ate, they worked. They did not touch. On the third morning, she said, Mr. Mercer, I can't haul that water bucket by myself. Yes, ma'am. He split it into 2 smaller pails the next day without being asked. On the 5th morning, she said, Mr. Mercer, your shirt's got a tear in the shoulder. I know it. Give it here. I'll mend it. You don't have to. I know I don't. Give it here. He gave it over. She mended it. When she handed it back, their fingers did not touch, but they came close enough that both of them noticed, and neither of them mentioned it. On the 7th morning, she stepped out onto the porch and found him oiling a rifle she had not seen before. A smaller one, lighter stock. Mr. Mercer? Ma'am. That ain't yours. No, ma'am. Whose is it? Yours if you want it to be. Clara sat down on the top step. I don't know how to shoot. I know it. I never held a gun. I know it. Why would you give me one? He set the cloth down. He turned the rifle and held it out stock first. Ma'am, there's 11 miles between us and the nearest neighbor. I go down to the creek, I'm gone 20 minutes. I go to hunt, I'm gone half a day. I go to trade, I'm gone too. If a man rides up this hill while I'm gone, and you don't know how to shoot, then I ain't done right by you. And if I shoot you by accident, I'd rather take the chance, ma'am. She took the rifle. He taught her in the yard that afternoon. How to hold it, how to sight, how to breathe. He never put his hands on hers. He stood behind her and said, higher and steadier, and ease off that trigger, ma'am, don't pull it. And she did not flinch when he came close. And the next morning she realized she had not flinched. And the morning after that, she realized he had noticed. On the 9th night after supper, she slid a piece of paper across the table to him. It was a scrap of newspaper she had found folded in his trunk. Mr. Mercer. Ma'am. Read this to me. He looked at it. He looked at her. His jaw worked once. Ma'am. Read it, Mr. Mercer. Ma'am, I can't. I know. He went still. How long you known? Since the first night. You moved the Bible on the shelf, but you shelved it upside down. A man who reads it don't do that. He did not speak. It ain't a shame, Mr. Mercer. Feels like one? Well, it ain't. And I'm going to teach you if you'll let me. He stared at the piece of paper. Why? Because I got something I can trade you for what you're teaching me, and I don't want to owe anybody anything ever again in my life. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, though nothing about his face moved. All right, ma'am. All right. She started him on letters that night by the stove. He was slow. He was patient. He did not apologize for being slow, and she did not praise him for being patient. They worked until the fire burned down, and when he said, "Good night, ma'am," there was something in his voice that had not been there a week before. She did not name it. Neither did he. The trouble started on the 12th day. Nate came in from the west pasture at noon with his jaw set hard, and he said without preamble, "Ma'am, fetch the rifle." "Mr. Mercer." "Fetch it. Stay on the porch. Don't come down the hill." He went back out. He was gone an hour. When he came back, he had his own rifle across his saddle and a look on his face she had not seen before. What was it? Fence post down by the lower line? A post falls, Mr. Mercer. That ain't... It didn't fall, ma'am. It was cut. Her stomach turned over. Cut how? Axe, clean. Could be a rider lost his way. Could be. Is it? No, ma'am. He said it flat. No heat. Just fact. What do we do? We watch. They watched. 2 mornings later, she went down to the creek for water and found a track in the mud on the far bank. A horseshoe print. Fresh. The cabin had 1 horse, and that horse had been in the lean-to all night. She did not run back. She made herself walk. "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am, creek's got a hoof print in the far bank that ain't ours." He set down the hatchet. "Show me." She showed him. He crouched. He looked. He stood up. He said very quietly, "Go back to the cabin, ma'am. Bolt the door. Don't open it till you hear me whistle." She went. She bolted the door. She sat with the rifle across her knees for 3 hours, and when his whistle came down the hill, she did not fling the door open. She called through the wood, "Whistle again, Mr. Mercer." He whistled again. She opened the door. "Good?" he said. "That was good, ma'am." "What did you find?" 3 riders. Came up the south face, turned back at the ridgeline. Why'd they turn back? Because they wasn't here to do it yet. They was here to look. Clara sat down on the bench by the door and put her head in her hands. "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am." "How long?" "Hard to say." "Your best guess." "A week. Maybe 2. She breathed out slow. "All right." "Ma'am." "I said all right, Mr. Mercer. I ain't asking you to send me back. I ain't going back. So we got a week. Or 2. What do we do with it?" He looked at her a long time. "We get you better with that rifle." "All right." "And I ride down to Dry Hollow tomorrow." Her head came up. "No." "Ma'am?" "No. You ain't leaving me up here alone." "Clara." It was the first time he had used her name. She noticed. He noticed her notice. Neither of them moved. "Clara," he said again, slower. "Marshal Hale's a good man, tired but honest. If Silas is moving, the marshal needs to know. And he needs to know from me, not from a body folks find in the spring. Take me with you." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because the minute you set foot in that town, Silas knows you're alive and your mine married, and he moves tonight instead of next week." The word he had almost used hung in the cabin. Mine. He had caught himself. She had caught him catch himself. Neither of them said a word about it. "One day," she said finally. "You ride down, you talk to the marshal, you ride back. One day. One day. You leave before light, you're back before dark." "Yes, ma'am." "And if you ain't back before dark, Mr. Mercer." "I will be." "And if you ain't..." He looked at her steady. "Then you bolt the door, you load the rifle, and you shoot the first man through it that ain't me. And you don't wait to ask his name." "All right." All right. He left before light. Clara did the chores. She fed the horse that was left. She hauled the water. She swept the floor she had already swept the day before. She read the Bible by the window because it was the only book in the cabin, and she read it out loud because the sound of her own voice was better than the sound of the wind through the pines. The sun crossed the sky. The sun started to drop. She stood on the porch at 5 o'clock and watched the trail. She stood on the porch at 6. She stood on the porch at 7 with the rifle in her hands and her heart in her throat, and the pines went dark, and the first star came out over the ridge, and she was about to turn and bolt herself inside and do exactly what he had told her to do when something caught her eye in the yard. Not a rider, not a track, a thing. It was nailed to the porch post not 2 feet from the door she had been walking in and out of all day, and she had not seen it, which meant somebody had come up to the cabin while she was inside reading the Bible out loud, and had hammered it there and had left, and she had not heard a single sound. A crow. Dead. Nailed by its wings. And beneath it, cut into the wood of the porch post in letters an inch deep, so fresh the pine was still weeping. Debts are paid in full. Clara Whitmore did not scream. She did not run. She brought the rifle up to her shoulder the way Nate Mercer had shown her, and she put her back flat against the cabin wall, and she scanned the tree line one slow pass at a time, and her hands did not shake, and her breath came slow, and somewhere underneath the fear, a thing she could not yet name, was rising hard and hot in her chest. She understood something in that moment she had not understood before. She had been sold once. She had been bought once. She was not about to be either one again. Down the hill, far off a hoofbeat. One rider, coming hard. She did not lower the rifle until she heard the whistle. She lowered it then. Nate Mercer came up the trail at a run, with his horse lathered white, and he did not see the crow right away, and she did not call out to him. She let him come up the steps. She let him put his hand on her shoulder for the first time in 12 days, just a squeeze, just to see she was whole. Then she turned her head, and he followed her look, and he saw it. He saw the crow. He saw the words. Nate Mercer did not curse. He did not speak at all. He just stood there with his hand on Clara Whitmore's shoulder, and his other hand dropped slow to the handle of the revolver on his hip, and he looked out at the dark tree line, where something had come and gone, while his wife read the Bible out loud to an empty cabin. And in that silence, at long last, Clara Whitmore understood exactly what kind of man she had married. Not a monster. Worse. A man who had been one once, and had laid it down and was being asked now to pick it back up. Nate pulled the crow down before full dark. He did it with his bare hands. He carried it past her without a word, and took it out behind the lean-to and buried it, and when he came back, his shirt was dusted with earth, and his jaw was set in a way Clara had not seen before. "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am." "The marshal." "He's coming." "When?" "Tomorrow. Day after at the latest. He's bringing 2 deputies he'd trust with his own wife." "That's 3 men." "Yes, ma'am." "How many will Silas bring?" Nate pried the bolt of his rifle open. He checked the chamber. He closed it. "More than 3. "How many more?" "Clara." "How many?" 8, maybe 10. She sat down on the bench by the door so hard the rifle knocked against her knee. 10. "He don't come light anymore, ma'am. He ain't come light since my brother." "Your brother?" Nate did not answer. "Your brother, Mr. Mercer?" "Another night." "No." "Clara." "No, Mr. Mercer. Tonight. You said you'd tell me another night, and a man who nails a dead bird to my porch ain't giving us another night. You tell me now, or I go into this blind, and I ain't going into anything blind ever again." He stood there a long moment with his hand on the door frame. Then he came inside. He sat down across from her. He put both hands on the table palms flat, the way he had the first night, like a man laying down a weapon. "My brother's name was Caleb." "Yes. He was 22 when Silas killed him." Clara's hand went to her mouth. "He worked Silas's books. That's where the $300 came from, by the way, what Caleb left me when they found him. Silas hired him because Caleb could read a ledger better than any banker in the territory. Paid him good. Treated him like a son, folks said. Till Caleb found the other ledger. The other ledger. 2 sets of books, ma'am. One for the taxman, one for the truth. Silas was skimming the cattle contracts, skimming the land deeds, skimming the debts. 3 families in Dry Hollow lost their homesteads because the numbers didn't match, and the numbers didn't match because Silas made sure they didn't. And Caleb found it. Caleb found it. Caleb came to me. Caleb said, "I'm going to the marshal." I told him to wait. I told him to let me ride down first, make sure the marshal then wasn't on Silas's pay. He didn't wait. What happened? They found him face down in the horse trough behind the saloon. Coroner called it drowned drunk. Caleb didn't drink, ma'am. Never had. Not one swallow his whole life. Clara closed her eyes. And you went after Silas. I went after the 3 men who held him under. I didn't go after Silas. Why not? Because Silas wasn't there that night. He was at a church supper, ma'am, sitting in the front pew. Folks saw him. So you killed 3 men. I killed 2. The 3rd I left alive 'cause he was crying, and a man who cries when he's caught ain't the same as a man who laughs when he's winning. I let him run. He told the town. The town made me the monster. Silas made sure of it. And the law. The law was Briggs then. Briggs is dead now. Hale took the badge after. Hale knows the truth. But knowing and proving ain't the same thing in this country. Clara opened her eyes. Mr. Mercer? Ma'am. The debt papers my father signed, the $300. Does Silas know you were the one who paid them? He does by now. And does he know why? Nate's jaw tightened. He knows who my brother was, ma'am. He's known for 3 years. Every time I come down to town, he tips his hat to me on the boardwalk. Every time. Like a dare. So this ain't about me. It's about both of us now. But it started before me. It started the night Caleb went in that horse trough, ma'am. You just give him an excuse to finish it. She stood up. She walked to the window. She turned back. Then we don't wait. Ma'am, we don't wait for him to come up this hill with 10 men. We make him come wrong. Clara, you said the marshal's coming tomorrow. Silas's riders scouted today. They're going to tell him we're ready for him, and he's going to move tonight or first light because a man like Silas don't let the law get ahead of him. Am I wrong? Nate stared at her. No, ma'am, you ain't wrong. Then we don't sleep tonight. We won't. And when they come up that hill, they don't find what they think they're going to find. What are they going to find? Clara Whitmore, 20 years old. 12 days a wife picked up the rifle he had given her and set it across the table between them. A woman with a gun, Mr. Mercer, and a husband who ain't the man they wrote the story about. He looked at her a long time, then he said quiet, "Yes, ma'am." They did not sleep. They moved the oil lamp so the cabin looked lit from the outside while they sat in the dark. Nate took the back window. Clara took the front. He made her repeat 3 times the thing he had told her 12 days ago. Shoot the first man through the door. That ain't me. And if they holler my name to get me to open it, she said, don't open it. And if they say you're hurt, don't open it. And if they've got my brothers with 'em, Mr. Mercer. He went still. Clara, and if they rode down to Dry Hollow and took Tom and Ben off the porch and brought 'em up here to make me open the door? Nate set his rifle down. He crossed the cabin. He crouched in front of her where she sat by the window. Ma'am, listen to me. I'm listenin'. Silas Vane ain't that smart. He's cruel. He's mean. He's rich enough to do a lot of damage. But he ain't patient, and he ain't careful, and taking 2 boys off a porch in daylight ain't something he'd think of in the hours he's had. He's coming here because his pride's up, not because he planned it. You sure? I ain't sure of much tonight, ma'am, but that I'm sure of. All right, all right. He went back to his window. The hours crawled. Around 3 in the morning, a branch snapped out beyond the corral. Clara's finger went to the trigger. Nate hissed, "Deer." She eased off. A minute later, a doe crossed the yard in the moonlight. Calm as Sunday, and Clara let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Around 4, she said into the dark, "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am?" "If this goes bad." "It ain't going bad." "If it does." "Clara." "If it does, Mr. Mercer, my brothers are with Walter. Walter ain't going to fight for them. If I'm gone, nobody's going to fight for them. Marshal Hale will he. Hale's a good man. He'll see those boys right. Promise me." "Ma'am, I ain't the one needs to promise. But if it comes to it, yes, I promise." She did not cry. She was past crying. "All right," she said. "All right." The first rider came up the trail at dawn. Not 10. 1. Clara saw him first. Her voice was a whisper. "Mr. Mercer, porch side." Nate crossed the room without a sound. He looked through the gap in the shutter. "That's Hale's deputy." "You sure?" "I'm sure." "Why only one?" "I don't know." The deputy came up into the yard at a walk. He did not dismount. He called out, not loud, "Mercer, it's Owens. Marshall sent me." Nate opened the door 6 inches. "Where's Hale?" 2 hours behind. I rode ahead 'cause we got word." "What word?" "Silas left town at midnight. 9 men. He's coming up the east face, Mercer. He ain't an hour out." Nate shut the door. He turned to Clara. "Change of plan." "I heard." "Owen stays. He can shoot. Hale's coming, but we ain't gonna have him in time." "Then we got 3 guns and 9 men." "We got 3 guns and a cabin and a hill. That ain't the same as open ground." "All right, all right." They did not have breakfast. There was no time. Nate put Owens at the back window. He put Clara at the front. He himself went out on the porch with his rifle across his arm because Nate Mercer had decided sometime between midnight and dawn that Silas Vane was not going to kick in the door of the cabin where his wife was sitting. Silas Vane was going to have to come through him first. They came up at 6:30. 9 riders. 1 wagon. The wagon was the wrong thing. Clara saw it through the window, and her blood went cold. "Mr. Mercer, there's a wagon." "I see it." "Why a wagon?" "Don't look at it yet. Eyes on the riders." "Mr. Mercer, eyes on the riders, Clara." Silas Vane rode at the head. She knew him without being told. She had never laid eyes on the man, but she knew him. He was not tall. He was not broad. He was a narrow man, in a clean coat with a silver hatband, and he rode a horse that cost more than her father's house, and he was smiling. He was smiling before he even reached the yard. "Nathaniel Mercer," he called, pleasant as a Sunday visitor. "You're a hard man to find at home." "I'm home now." "So I see." "State your business, Silas." "I've come for the girl." "There ain't a girl here. There's my wife, and you're standing on my land." Silas laughed, a small dry laugh. "Your wife. Yes, I heard about the ceremony. Very moving, I'm told. Whole town still talking." "Then you heard the part where the preacher said the words." "I heard. I also heard, Nathaniel, that you paid a debt that wasn't yours to pay." "It's mine now, signed over. Walter put his mark on the paper. Walter's mark don't mean much when Walter was drunk. Walter wasn't drunk when he signed. I was there." Silas's smile thinned. "Step aside, Mercer." "No." "Step aside and I take the girl and you and me settle accounts another day. My word on it." "Your word, Silas." "My word." "Your word's what drowned my brother in a horse trough." The yard went quiet. One of Silas's riders shifted in the saddle. Silas held up a hand. The rider stilled. "Your brother," Silas said, slow, "died in a regrettable accident 3 years ago. And I'll remind you, Mercer, that the coroner's finding was, I know the finding." "Then we have nothing to argue about." "We got plenty to argue about. But I ain't here to argue it. I'm here to tell you to turn that horse around." Silas's eyes flicked. Just once. Toward the wagon. Clara saw it. Her stomach dropped to her boots. "Mr. Mercer," she said through the window low. "The wagon. I see it, ma'am." "There's somebody in it." "I know." Silas raised his voice. "Clara." She did not answer. "Clara Whitmore, come out on that porch, darlin'. I'd like a word." "Don't," Nate said without looking back. Don't move. Clara, Silas called. There's somebody in my wagon wants to see you. Nate's hand tightened on his rifle. Silas. Mercer. Whoever's in that wagon, you put him back on the ground where you found him and you ride out, and this ends different. I don't think so, Nathaniel. Silas nodded at one of his men. The man pulled back the tarp on the wagon bed. Walter Whitmore sat up. His hands were tied. His mouth was bleeding. His left eye was swelled shut. He was alive. Clara's breath went out of her like she'd been kicked. Pa. Clara, Silas called, easy as weather. Your daddy's been telling me the signing wasn't proper. Said he was coerced. Said he wants to rescind. We're just out here to make it legal. Pa. Clara's voice cracked. Pa, is that true? Walter lifted his head. Blood ran down his chin into his collar. He looked at his daughter across 40 feet of yard, and he did something Walter Whitmore had not done once, not once, in all the years since her mother died. He straightened his back. Don't you listen to him, Clara. Pa, don't you listen to one word, girl. I signed. I signed clean. I signed 'cause it was the first right thing I done in a decade. You stay where you are. Silas backhanded him. The sound of it cracked across the yard like a rifle shot. Walter went down on his side in the wagon bed and did not get back up. Clara was out the door before Nate could stop her. Clara? Clara, no. She came out on the porch with the rifle at her shoulder. She was not crying. She was not shaking. She was a 20-year-old woman who had just watched her father take a blow to protect her for the first time in her life, and something inside her had gone very, very quiet. Silas Vane. Silas turned his horse. His smile came back slow. Mrs. Mercer. Don't call me that. What should I call you? Clara Whitmore. That's my name. That's been my name my whole life. You touch my father again, and it'll be the last name you ever hear spoke. Clara, Nate said low. I'm all right, Mr. Mercer. Clara stepped back. I'm all right. She was not all right, but she was not going back inside. Silas looked at her across the yard. His smile changed. It went from the smile of a man selling something to the smile of a man who has just realized he is not going to get what he came for. Put the rifle down, darlin'. No, sir. You ain't gonna shoot me. I ain't aiming to, sir, but my hand might slip. A laugh went up from one of his own riders, just one. Silas's head turned 1 inch. The laugh stopped. Clara, Silas said softer. Your daddy owes me. My daddy paid, in full, to my husband. You got the papers read to you, you know it's clean. The papers ain't clean till I say they are. The papers are clean when the law says they are. And the law's coming up that trail behind you right now. Silas went still. You're bluffing. She ain't bluffing, Silas, Nate said quietly. Hale's an hour out. Owens is in the cabin. He rode ahead. You're lying. Owens, Nate called not loud. Show him. The back shutter opened. A rifle barrel slid out. Owens's voice calm. Morning, Mr. Vane. Silas's smile died. He looked at his riders. His riders looked at each other. A man with 9 guns against 3 is one thing. A man with 9 guns against 3 and a federal marshal coming up the trail is another thing entire. 2 of his riders were already easing their horses back a half step, and Silas saw it, and his face did the thing Clara had been waiting for without knowing she was waiting. It broke. The pleasant was gone. The mask was gone. What was left was a narrow man in a clean coat who had just understood that he was losing. He went for his gun. Nate's rifle came up first. Clara's heart stopped. The shot did not come from Nate. It came from Silas. It went wide because Silas was pulling and firing in the same motion, and a man who does that is a man who has not shot at another man in a long time, and his horse flinched, and the bullet took a chunk out of the porch post 6 inches from Clara's head. Nate fired once. Silas went sideways off the horse. He did not fall clean. He caught his foot in the stirrup, and the horse dragged him 3 steps before it stopped confused, and then Silas was on the ground in the dust, clutching his shoulder, cursing in a voice Clara had not yet heard from him, high and thin and frightened. His riders did not move. Not one. They sat on their horses and looked at their boss on the ground, and they looked at Nate Mercer on the porch, and they looked at the rifle barrel still sticking out of the back shutter, and the nearest one, a man Clara later learned was named Boyd, said slow and clear, "Mr. Mercer, I got no quarrel with you." "Then drop the gun belt, Boyd." Boyd dropped the gun belt. "The rest of you." 8 gun belts hit the dirt. On the ground, Silas was crying. Actual tears. A man who had laughed in a saloon about taking a quiet girl off a broken ranch was lying in the dust of his own making and crying into it. Nate came down the porch steps slow. Clara did not. She walked past him. She walked past Silas's riders who did not meet her eyes. She walked to the wagon, and she climbed up into the bed, and she untied her father's hands with fingers that did not shake once. "Pa, girl, you hit bad. I'll live. You came up here in Silas's wagon. Didn't have a choice, girl." "Yes, you did." "Clara, you had a choice. You made it back there." She nodded at his split mouth. "That was your choice. And it was a good one, Pa. First one I seen you make in a long while." Walter Whitmore began to cry then, quiet, ashamed. Clara climbed down out of the wagon. She walked over to where Silas Vane was writhing in the dirt. She crouched. She reached inside his clean coat with a steady hand and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers tied with string. She had never seen the papers before in her life, but she knew what they were. She had known what they were the second Nate said land deeds 12 hours ago at the table. The second ledger, the proof. She straightened up. "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am." "Marshal Hale ought to see these." "Yes, ma'am." "The minute he comes up that trail?" "Yes, ma'am." Down below on the east face, a sound carried up through the pines. Hooves. Several horses, coming hard. Clara Whitmore stood in the yard of a cabin 11 miles from anywhere with her husband's rifle cooling on the porch, and her father weeping in a wagon and a cattle baron bleeding in the dust at her feet, and she held the papers in her hand, and she did not tremble. She looked down at Silas Vane. "Mr. Vane." He did not answer. He was past answering. "Mr. Vane, you look at me." He looked up. "You sold a story about me in a saloon 4 nights back. You told it to a bartender who laughed. Now you get to hear a different one. And the whole territory's going to hear it, and the woman telling it ain't going to be quiet about a single word." She turned. She walked back to the porch. She stood beside Nate Mercer, husband of 12 days, and she did not take his hand, and he did not take hers, but their shoulders touched where they stood, and neither of them moved away from it. And up the trail from the east, the hoofbeats of Marshal Thomas Hale and his deputies came on steady and getting closer. And the long summer of Dry Hollow's lies was finally running out. Marshal Thomas Hale came up into the yard with 2 deputies behind him, and he took in the whole thing without breaking stride. 9 men with their gun belts in the dirt. Silas Vane bleeding in the dust. A wagon with a beaten man sitting up in it. Nate Mercer on the porch with a rifle he had already fired once. And a 20-year-old girl standing beside him with a sheaf of papers in her hand. Hale dismounted. He was a long, tired man with white in his mustache and a badge that had been polished so many times the star was wearing thin. "Nate." "Thomas." "Anybody dead?" "No, sir." "Anybody going to be?" "Not if you're quick." Hale nodded once. He turned to his deputies. "Cuff Vane, cuff the rest. Any man gives you trouble, you cuff him twice." "Marshal." Silas started from the ground. "Silas, you say one word before I've had my coffee, and I'll let Mercer here finish what he started." Silas shut his mouth. Hale looked at Clara. "Ma'am." "Marshal." "You the bride." "I am, sir." "You hurt?" "No, sir." "That your father in the wagon?" "Yes, sir." "He hurt?" "Yes, sir." "He going to live?" "I believe so, sir." Hale nodded. He took his hat off. He wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. He put the hat back on. "Miss Whitmore," Mrs. Mercer, sir, as of 12 days ago. Hale's mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was close. Mrs. Mercer, what's in your hand? She walked down off the porch. She did not hurry. She crossed the yard to him and she held out the papers. These were in Silas Vane's coat martial. I don't know all the words on them, but I know what they are. Do you? Yes, sir. My husband's brother died over these papers. The deputies stopped moving. Every man in the yard stopped moving. Hale took the papers. He untied the string. He held them up into the morning light, and he read the first page, and then the second, and then the third, and his jaw worked, and he turned very slowly to where Silas Vane was lying in the dirt. Silas? Marshal, that's not what... Silas, you shut your mouth. You shut it all the way. If I hear another sound out of you before we reach town, I'm going to leave you tied to the back of my horse and let you walk it. Silas shut his mouth. Hale tucked the papers inside his coat. Nate? Thomas. You didn't kill him? No, sir. Why not? Nate looked out across the yard. He looked at Clara, standing in the dust with her hands empty now. He looked at Walter Whitmore weeping in the wagon. He looked at the porch post with a bullet chunk 6 inches from where his wife's head had been. Because I'm tired, Thomas. I'm tired of letting bad men decide what kind of man I got to be. Hale looked at him a long moment. That's a fair answer, Nate. It's the only one I got. It's enough. They took Silas Vane down the mountain that afternoon. They took him roped and slumped in the back of his own wagon, with his own riders walking behind in irons, and the deputies on either side, and Marshal Hale out front. Walter Whitmore rode in the wagon beside Silas unbound, because Hale had looked at him once and said, "Walter, you're a witness now. You sober enough to stay one." And Walter had said, "I am, sir." And Hale had said, "Then sit up straight and try to remember it." Clara watched them go from the porch. She did not cry. She did not speak either for a long time after the last of them was gone down the trail. Nate came up beside her. He did not touch her. He stood close enough that their sleeves nearly brushed, and he let the quiet sit. Finally she said, "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am." "My hands are shaking." He looked down. They were. "That's all right. It wasn't shaking a minute ago." "It don't work that way, ma'am." "How does it work?" "It shakes after, always after, never during. Body knows what it's got to do while it's happening. Then it gets the bill." "When does the bill go away?" "It don't, ma'am. You just learn to carry it." She looked up at him. For the first time since the church, she looked at him straight on, without the rifle between them, without the table between them, without 12 days of careful distance between them. "Mr. Mercer?" "Ma'am?" "My name is Clara." He took a breath. "Yes, ma'am. I know." "Then why don't you ever use it?" He turned his hat in his hands. "Because, ma'am, I wasn't sure I had the right yet." "You called me Clara last night." "I know I did." "You caught yourself." "I know I did." "Don't catch yourself again." "Yes, ma'am. Yes, Clara." "Better." They stood there together a long time. Then she said, "Mr. Mercer." "Ma'am." He stopped. "Clara." "Nate." "Ma'am." "Your name is Nate. You said it. I'll say it." "Yes, ma'am." "Nate?" "Yes, Clara?" "Something happened to me this morning. I don't rightly know what yet. But something shifted, and I ain't the same woman I was yesterday, and I don't know if I ever will be again." "No, ma'am, you won't." "You say that like you know." "I do know." "From your brother." "From my brother." She nodded. "I got to go down to Dry Hollow," she said. "I figured." "My brother's." "I know." "Tomorrow, maybe, when I've slept. I'll go with you." "No." "Clara." "Nate, listen to me. I got to walk down that street on my own feet. The last time I was in that town, I rode out of it in a wagon. A man was driving for me. I got to go back in on my own legs this time, or the story ain't finished." He looked at her. "All right. All right. I'll ride behind you." "Nate, Half a mile back. I won't set foot in the town unless you call. You won't see me. But I won't have you on that road alone, Clara. Not yet. Not with Silas's men just now arrested. You don't know which of 'em had brothers of their own." She thought about it. "Half a mile? Half a mile. All right." 2 days later, she rode down into Dry Hollow by herself, and she rode in on her own horse in her own clothes, and Nate Mercer stayed back up the trail the way he had promised. The town saw her coming before she reached the first building. A boy on the boardwalk ran inside the general store and came back out with his mother, who came back out with 2 other women who came back out with 3 men. By the time she reached the middle of the street, every door in Dry Hollow had somebody standing in it. Clara Whitmore rode past all of them. She did not speak. She did not nod. She rode straight to her father's ranch on the far side of the creek, and she dismounted at the gate, and she walked up to the porch where she had cried for herself 1,000 times as a girl. The door opened before she reached it. Tom was on the other side. Thin, pale, still in the shirt she had mended for him the week before the wedding. He did not say anything. He just looked at her. Then Ben came around from behind him. Ben looked at her face for 1 second. Then Ben ran. He hit her at the knees and wrapped his arms around her legs and would not let go. And Clara Whitmore, who had not cried in a burning cabin or a loaded church or a yard full of men with guns, dropped to her knees on her father's porch and wept into her brother's hair. "I thought you was dead, Clara." "I ain't dead, honey. Silas's men came. They took Pa." "I know. They said you was—" "I know what they said. I know. Ben, look at me. I ain't dead. I ain't hurt. I'm right here. Are you staying, Clara?" She looked up over his head. Tom was in the doorway. He was 12 years old, and he was looking at her like a grown man looks at another grown man when a question has to be asked straight. "Pa ain't here, Clara." "I know. He's in town, with the marshal." "Is Pa going to jail?" "No, honey, not jail. He's a witness. Against Silas." "Yes. Will they believe him?" "They will. Because he ain't the only one. And because what Silas did can be read on paper now, and paper don't lie the way men do." Tom nodded. Then he said quieter, "Clara." "Yes." "Are you back?" She did not answer right away. She looked at him. She looked at Ben, still wrapped around her knees. She looked at the porch. She had grown up on the porch where her mother had died, the porch where her father had sold her 12 nights ago over a bottle of whiskey and a debt. "I don't know yet, Tom." "Oh. I'm sorry, honey." "No. It's all right. It's all right." He was trying so hard not to cry. A 12-year-old boy trying to be the man of a house because his sister had been sold and his father had been taken, and nobody had come yet to tell him he could stop being grown up for a minute. Clara stood up. She put her hand on the back of his neck. "Tom." "Yes, ma'am." "You ain't the man of this house." "There ain't nobody else?" "You ain't the man of this house because there ain't going to be a man of this house for a while. There's just going to be us. You and Ben and me and Pa when he gets back. And we're going to figure it out one day at a time. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you don't call me ma'am. I'm your sister. Always was. Always will be." "Yes, Clara." "Better." She spent 4 days at the ranch. She cooked for her brothers. She mended what needed mending. She rode out to check the stock that Walter had let go feral through the spring, and she found more of them alive than she had feared. She slept in her old bed on the 2nd night and found she could not sleep in it, and moved to the kitchen floor the 3rd night and slept fine. On the 4th day, Walter came home. Marshal Hale brought him in a buckboard. Walter's face was mostly healed. His eye was still swollen. He got down from the wagon by himself and stood at the gate of his own ranch and did not come through it until Clara opened it for him. "Clara." "Pa, they held me 2 nights to take my statement. Then they let me come home. Marshall says Silas is going to Miles City. There's a federal judge there. Hale says Silas ain't ever coming back to Dry Hollow." "Good." "Clara." "Yes, Pa. I ain't going to ask you to forgive me." "Good, Pa, 'cause I can't, not yet." I know. Maybe one day. I don't ask for it. I know you don't. They stood at the gate a long time. Then Walter said, Clara, the boys. The boys are fine. I've been with them. I know. I seen the stock. You rode the fences. Yes. You going back up that mountain? Clara looked at him. For the first time since her mother died, she looked at Walter Whitmore and did not see a man she was afraid of, and did not see a man she hated, and did not see a man she pitied. She just saw her father, broken, sober for the moment, bleeding into a collar she had stitched for him years ago, when her mother was still alive to teach her how. I don't know yet, Pa. If you do. Yes. Take the boys up with you. Not now, not today. Later, when you know. Take 'em up. I ain't fit to raise them, girl. I thought I was. I ain't. And I'd rather admit it today than let them pay for it the way you did. Clara's throat closed up. Pa? Don't say nothing. Just think on it. I will. All right. He walked past her up the porch steps. He went into his own house. She stayed at the gate a long while. That night, after the boys were asleep, she rode out. She did not take the wagon. She did not take a lantern. She rode out of Dry Hollow on the horse Nate had given her, and she took the trail up the east face by moonlight, because she had ridden it twice now, and she knew it, and she rode the whole 11 miles without stopping. She came into the yard of the cabin at 2 in the morning. Nate was on the porch. He had been on the porch, she understood, every night since she left. Clara. Nate? You all right? I'm all right. The boys. Fine. Pa too. Alive, I mean. Fine's a stretch. Come inside. Not yet. She sat down on the top step. He sat down on the step below her because he had figured out sometime in the last 2 weeks that sitting below her made her breathe easier than sitting beside her. Nate. Yes, Clara. I got to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth, even if the truth makes it harder for both of us. All right. When you rode into Dry Hollow that morning, when you went to my father, did you go because you were trying to protect me? Or because you were trying to get at Silas, through me? He did not answer right away. He took his hat off. He turned it in his hands. He looked out at the dark pines. Clara. Yes. I'm going to answer you honest. You ready? I'm ready. When I walked into your daddy's house that morning, I was trying to get at Silas. Her heart dropped, but by the time I walked out, he said I was trying to protect you. That ain't the same thing. No, ma'am, it ain't. Which one rode up to the church? Both of 'em. Nate. Clara, listen. I ain't going to lie to you. Not now, not ever. I rode into that house wanting to hurt Silas. I saw you sitting at that kitchen table. You didn't even look up when I come in. You was 20 years old, and you looked 60, and you had your hands folded in your lap the way my mother used to fold hers before my daddy come home drunk. And something in me turned over, Clara. Something turned over and it ain't turned back. She was crying. She did not try to stop. I didn't know you then. I know that. I had no right. But I knew what I was looking at. I was looking at a woman who'd already been spent and there wasn't nothing left but the counting. And I decided right there at your daddy's kitchen table that Silas wasn't getting another one. Not on my watch. Not while I had $300 and a cabin and a name folks was already afraid of. So you used the fear. I used what I had, Clara. A man uses what he's got. And the wedding. The wedding was so the law couldn't unhook you. That's all. I swear it on my brother. That's all it was. Was. The word hung. Nate. Yes. Is it still? He looked up at her. No, ma'am. What is it now? He was quiet a long time. It's whatever you want it to be, Clara. I meant what I said on the church steps. 12 days ago or 12 years. Don't matter. You ride away in the fall, I put you on the train myself. You stay, I build a second room. You bring your brothers up, I build a third. You want me on the floor by the door the rest of my natural life. That's where I sleep. You don't owe me a thing. Not the marriage, not the ring, not a kind word. Nate? Yes. Stop. Yes, ma'am. She came down one step. She sat beside him. Their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved away. I don't know what I want yet, she said. I know. I know I don't want to leave. All right. I know I don't want you on the floor. He went very still. Clara. I ain't saying what you think I'm saying. I mean you ought to have a bed, Nate. You're a grown man. There's room to build one. That's what I mean. Oh. You thought I meant... I didn't know what you meant, ma'am. Well, I didn't. Not yet. That's a door we'll walk through when we walk through it, both of us. Together. When it's time, not before. Yes, ma'am. Clara. Yes, Clara. She turned her head. She looked at him in the moonlight scar and tired eyes and careful hands, the most feared man in the Montana high country, who had not once touched her without asking who had put himself between her and 9 guns, who had told her the truth in his own yard, when a lie would have been easier. Nate. Yes. I'd like you to hold my hand. Just that. Just my hand. He reached over. He took her hand. His palm was rough. Hers was steady, their fingers closed. They sat on the porch step of a cabin 11 miles from the nearest town, and the moon moved across the ridge and somewhere down in Dry Hollow. Silas Vane was in chains, and Walter Whitmore was sober, and 2 boys were asleep in a house with the first real hope they had felt in a year, and Clara Whitmore held the hand of the man she had married, and she did not flinch, and he noted it, the way he had told her he would, the way he had been noting everything from the moment he laid eyes on her at a kitchen table in a house where she had already been spent. Nate. Yes, Clara. I ain't sold. No, ma'am. I ain't saved neither. No, ma'am. What am I? He lifted her hand. He looked at the silver ring on her finger in the moonlight. He did not kiss the hand. He just held it gentle the way a man holds something he has finally at long last stopped being afraid of losing. Ma'am, he said, you're a woman sitting on her own porch in her own country, next to a man who's been waiting his whole life to ask permission and never knew it till you walked into a church. That's what you are. That's all you are. And that's everything. Clara Whitmore leaned her shoulder against his. She did not speak again for a long time. She didn't need to. Morning came up over the ridge before either of them had slept. Clara's hand was still in his. Nate had not moved. At some point in the last hour, his thumb had started moving slow once across the back of her knuckles, and she had not asked him to stop. Nate. Yes, Clara. I think we ought to eat something. Yes, ma'am. And I think you ought to sleep an hour. I ain't tired. You're a liar, Nate Mercer. Yes, ma'am. She laughed. It was small and tired and a little broken, but it was the first laugh she had laughed in 13 days, and he heard it the way a man hears rain after a drought. They ate. He slept an hour not on the floor on the bench by the stove, because she told him the floor was a thing of the past, and the floor was going to stay there. He did not argue. 3 days later, Marshal Hale came up the trail. Clara saw him first. She was mending a shirt on the porch, and Nate was out by the lean-to splitting wood, and she called Ryder, and Nate came around the corner with the axe still in his hand. Hale raised his free hand as he came into the yard. It's me. Morning, Thomas. Morning, Nate. Mrs. Mercer. Marshal. He dismounted. He took his hat off. He did not smile. I got news. All right. Silas is in Miles City. Judge has set a trial for the 2nd week of August. All right. That ain't the news. Nate's hand tightened on the axe. What's the news? Silas's lawyer rode into Dry Hollow yesterday. Fellow named Pritchard. Come up from Helena. He's walking around town serving papers. Clara set the shirt down. What kind of papers? Debt calls. Silas was carrying paper on half the families in Dry Hollow, Mrs. Mercer. He wasn't just after you. He was after everybody he could leverage. Pritchard's trying to call every one of them in at once, turn the whole town against the witnesses before the trial starts. To scare folks into unsaying what they said. That's right. Or into not testifying at all. That's right. Nate set the axe down. Thomas, what do you need? I need the second ledger. You got it. I got the copy. I need the original. Judge in Miles City wants to see the hand it was written in. That means your brother's hand. That means Caleb's ledger. And Nate, I know you've been keeping it, and I ain't ever asked you where, and I ain't asking now. I'm just asking you to bring it down. Nate was quiet a long moment. I'll bring it. Good man. There's one more thing. Yes. I'll bring it if Clara rides down with me. Hale looked at her. Mrs. Mercer, are you willing? Clara stood up. Marshall, I've been waiting to be asked that question my whole life. Yes, I'm willing. They rode down the next morning. Nate had the ledger in his saddlebag wrapped in oilcloth, the thing Caleb Mercer had died for 3 years before. Clara rode beside him, not behind, and when they came into Dry Hollow at noon, the town saw them coming the same way it had seen her coming before, and this time she did not ride past the eyes on the boardwalk. She stopped her horse at the first one. It was the blacksmith, a man named Coe. Mr. Coe. Mrs. Mercer. I hear a lawyer named Pritchard served you a paper yesterday. Coe's eyes flicked to his feet. He did, ma'am. Debt call. $220, ma'am. Silas's paper. Pritchard says I got 30 days. You got that paper on you? It's at the shop. Bring it out. He hesitated. Mrs. Mercer. Mr. Coe, I ain't asking for your money. I'm asking to see the paper. You had it explained to you by a lawyer you ain't hired. I'd like to hear it read back to you by somebody who's on your side. He brought the paper. Clara read it out loud in the street standing beside her horse. She read it slow. She stopped at the places she did not understand, and she asked Nate, and Nate asked her to read those lines again, and between the two of them, they worked through it the way she had worked through the Bible with him by the stove. Halfway through, a woman named Mrs. Albright came out of the dress shop and stood listening. By the time Clara reached the end, there were 11 people in the street. Mr. Coe. Yes, ma'am. This paper says you owe $220 by the 31st of July, or Silas Vane takes your shop. Yes, ma'am. Silas Vane is in a jail cell in Miles City. Yes, ma'am. Silas Vane can't take a shop from a jail cell, Mr. Coe, and this paper don't mean a thing till it's filed with the county, and the county clerk is Mr. Pierce, and Mr. Pierce answers to Marshall Hale right now because the county judge is in Miles City at the trial. You understand what I'm saying? I'm startin' to. This paper ain't a debt yet. It's a scare. A lawyer named Pritchard walked it into your shop, and he made you feel like you had to pay or lose. That ain't what the law says. That's what Pritchard wants you to think it says. Jesus Christ, said Mrs. Albright from the crowd. Pardon, ma'am, but I agree, Clara said. The street laughed. It was a nervous laugh. It was a real one. Mrs. Mercer. Yes. I got one too. It was a woman Clara did not know. Young. A baby on her hip. Bring it out, ma'am. She brought it out. Clara read that one too. By the time the sun was lower in the sky, there were 21 debt papers on the boardwalk of the general store, and Clara Whitmore Mercer was sitting on an overturned crate reading them out one by one, and Nate Mercer was standing behind her with his hand on the back of the crate, not touching her, but near enough that any man in Dry Hollow who thought about giving her trouble could see where he stood. Nobody gave her trouble. Pritchard, the lawyer from Helena, tried once. He came out of the hotel around 3 o'clock with his vest buttoned wrong. Mrs. Mercer. Mr. Pritchard. You are practicing law without a license, ma'am. No, sir. I'm reading out loud. Last I checked, reading was legal in the territory of Montana. You are interfering with my client's collections. Your client is in a jail cell, Mr. Pritchard, and the paper you're serving ain't filed. I know that because I asked Mr. Pierce before I sat down on this crate. Would you like me to call Mr. Pierce out to repeat what he told me? Pritchard's mouth worked. Mrs. Mercer, you... Mr. Pritchard. It was Marshall Hale coming down the boardwalk. Marshall? Go back to the hotel, Pritchard. Pack your bag. Be on the evening coach. You can't. Pritchard, I got a jail cell with your client's name still warm in it, and I got 2 deputies with nothing to do till the coach leaves. Don't make me find work for 'em." Pritchard went back to the hotel. Pritchard was on the evening coach. That night Clara and Nate stayed at the boarding house in town because the ride back up the mountain would have taken them past midnight, and Walter came down to see her before supper, and Tom and Ben came with him. Walter stood in the doorway of the boarding house parlor with his hat in his hands. "Clara." "Pa, folks in town are talking about you." "I know. They're saying you're the one turned Pritchard around." "I had help. They're saying it's the first honest day Dry Hollow's had in 10 years. "Pa?" "Clara." "Sit down, Pa." He sat down. He sat with his hat in his hands, and his 2 sons sat on either side of him. And for the first time since his wife died, Walter Whitmore looked like a man in a room with his family, instead of a man alone in a crowd. "Clara." "Yes, Pa." "I come to tell you something." "All right." "I signed the ranch over to you this afternoon. Mr. Pierce has got the papers. Your name, not mine, not the boys. Yours." Clara went still. "Pa." "Hear me out." "Pa, you can't." "Hear me out, girl. I ain't fit. I said it 3 days ago and I meant it. I've been sober 11 days now, which is the longest stretch I had since your mother passed. I'd like to keep it up. I don't trust myself to yet. A man holding a deed and a bottle is a man who'll drink the deed sooner or later. So the deed ain't mine anymore. It's yours. You want to come home, you got a home. You want the boys down there with you, you got a home for them. You want to sell it, it's yours to sell. I'll work it for you if you'll have me. I'll work it for wages. And if one day I earn it back, if I earn it, Clara, I'll ask you then." Clara did not speak for a long moment. "Pa." "Yes." "Why?" He looked up at her. "Because you saved my life in a wagon 2 weeks ago, girl. Not with a gun. With your face. You looked at me when he hit me, and you didn't look away. And I realized with Silas's hand on my jaw that you had looked at me exactly that same way 100 times before, and I'd been the one not looking back. I can't undo it, Clara, but I can do this, so I'm doing this." Tom was crying. He did not try to hide it. He was 12, and his father had just said the first true thing Tom had ever heard him say, and he was letting it happen. Ben crawled across the parlor floor and put his head on Clara's knee. Clara put her hand on Ben's hair. "Pa." "Yes, girl." "I accept." "All right." "And you'll work for wages. Fair ones. I'll set 'em." "Yes, ma'am. And Tom and Ben are going to come up the mountain with me. Not tonight, not this month, but before winter, because they need air and they need work, and they need a woman in the house, and I'm going to be that woman, and Nate is going to be the man." "Yes, ma'am." "And you are going to come up once a week for Sunday supper, Pa, whether I'm speaking to you that week or not. And some weeks I will be and some weeks I won't, but you'll come anyway because that's what I'm asking." Walter lowered his head. "Yes, ma'am." Nate was in the doorway. Clara had not heard him come in. Neither had Walter. They both turned and Nate took his hat off and he said careful, "I didn't mean to hear that, sir. I come to fetch Clara for supper." "You heard it anyway." "I heard enough." "Good. I'd as soon say it once." Nate came in. He stood at Clara's chair. He did not put his hand on her shoulder. He never did without asking. But he stood close enough that Walter understood something about the two of them that he had not up until that second let himself understand. Walter stood. "Mr. Mercer." "Mr. Whitmore." "I owed you $300. "You owed Silas $300, sir. I paid him. That money's between me and the man in the cell, not between you and me. I owe you my girl's life." "No, sir. You owe her yours. She done the work. I just held the door." Walter's eyes filled. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes, sir." "You take care of her." "No, sir." Walter blinked. "I beg your pardon." Nate's voice did not rise. "I don't take care of her, sir. I stand beside her. There's a difference. One says she can't. The other says she can, and I'd be a fool to walk this country without her. Walter stared at him a long time. Then he nodded once, and he sat back down. The trial in Miles City ran 11 days. They read Caleb Mercer's ledger in open court. They read Clara's testimony, which she gave standing up with her hands folded in front of her in a voice that did not shake once. They read Walter Whitmore's testimony, which he gave sober for the first time in his adult life. They read the statements of 9 riders who had sat on their horses in a yard 11 miles from Dry Hollow and watched their boss go off his saddle, and every one of them said the same thing. Silas Vane fired first, and Nate Mercer fired once, and Nate Mercer had the drop on him the whole time and chose the shoulder. The jury was out 40 minutes. Silas Vane was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, false imprisonment, assault, and in the end, the murder of Caleb Mercer by proxy, because the third man Nate had let run had been found 3 years late and had been willing to say in a courtroom in Miles City what he had only ever whispered drunk in saloons before. Silas Vane was sentenced to life. He did not look at Nate when they read the sentence. He did not look at Clara either. He looked at the floor. By the time Nate and Clara rode back up the mountain, it was the last week of August. The first frost was still a month off. The pines were as dark as they had been the morning Clara had first ridden through them in a wagon with a man she did not know. She rode beside him now. They did not talk much on the trail. They did not need to. When they came up to the cabin, she dismounted first. She did not wait for him to come around. She walked up the porch steps and stopped at the top one and turned around. "Nate?" "Yes, Clara." "Come up." He came up. He stopped on the step below her, the way he had taken to doing without thinking about it. "Up here," she said. "The same step as me." He came up. He was a head taller than her. He had to look down. He did. "Clara, I want to ask you something." "All right. And I want you to answer me honest. The way you answered me the night after the fight. The way you answered me in the boarding house. The way you've been answering me since the church. Honest. No soft edges. You promise." "I promise." "Do you love me?" He did not blink. He did not pause. "Yes, ma'am." "Since when?" "Since the kitchen table at your daddy's house, ma'am. Same turn I told you about on the porch. Whatever that turn was. It never went back." "You told me that was something else." "I told you that was wanting to protect you. It was. And then it was wanting to know you. And then it was knowing you. And then it was this. The names change, Clara. The thing don't." "Have you said it to anyone before?" "No, ma'am." "Not a woman." "Not a woman. Not my brother. Not my mother. And she raised me too, and I failed her." "Why tell me now?" "Because you asked, ma'am. I wasn't going to say it unasked. I wasn't going to put it on you. A man who puts it on a woman who's already carrying a year's worth of weight ain't a man who loves her. He's a man who wants something else and ain't honest about it." Clara was crying. She was not hiding it. "Nate." "Yes. I love you back." He shut his eyes. He did not speak for almost a minute. She watched his throat work. She watched his hand down at his side open and close. "Clara." "Yes." "Say it again." "I love you back, Nathaniel Mercer. I did not know what the word was for before you. I wasn't sure the word was real. I thought it was something folks said to cover what they meant, which was own or keep or need. You never used any of those words. You used my name. And one day I realized you'd been saying I love you since the church steps. You just had a different way of spelling it." He opened his eyes. "Ma'am." "Clara Nate, you promised." "Clara." "Yes. May I kiss you?" She did not flinch. "Yes," she said. "You may." He did. It was a small kiss, a careful one, a first one for both of them in all the ways that counted. His hand came up and cupped the side of her face, and she did not pull away, and her hand came up and covered his, and she kept it there. When they pulled apart, she leaned her forehead against his. "Nate." "Yes." "Build the second room." "Yes, Clara." "And the third." "Yes, Clara. And the fourth one day, maybe. We'll see." She felt him smile. She did not have to look. Yes, Clara. That winter, the cabin had 4 people in it. Tom came up in late September with a bag of his books and a new saddle Walter had bought him on wages earned from his own daughter's ranch. Ben came up a week later riding double with Walter, and Walter stayed for Sunday supper and then rode back down before dark sober, which he had been by then for 71 days. By the first snow, Clara Whitmore Mercer was teaching 4 women from Dry Hollow how to read a deed. By Christmas, it was 11. By spring, women were riding in from as far as Cook City with papers in their saddlebags, and Clara read them on the porch of a cabin that used to be the cabin of the most feared man in Montana, and was now the cabin of a woman who had shown the whole high country that a name you were given wasn't the same as a name you chose. Folks in Dry Hollow still told the story of the wedding that looked like an execution. Some said Nate Mercer bought a bride. Some said Clara Whitmore was saved by a dangerous man. Neither one was right. The truth sat on a porch 11 miles from anywhere, and it answered to 2 names, and it slept under the same roof, and it raised 2 brothers, and it taught women to read what the men had been hiding from them. And every single summer on the anniversary of a certain morning, in a certain white church, it walked out into the yard together, hand in hand, and stood there a minute without saying a word, because neither of them needed to say it anymore. Clara Whitmore had walked into a church as a debt. She had walked out as a question. She had ridden 2 days up a mountain as a stranger. She had come down 2 weeks later as a witness. She had stood in the middle of a dusty street with a paper in her hand and turned a town's fear into a town's awakening. She had asked a man a question on a porch step, and the answer had been yes, and so had hers. And that yes had been the first yes she had ever spoken in her life that belonged to her alone. She had not been sold. She had not been saved. She had been seen at last by a man who had laid down the monster they made of him to stand beside her, and she had chosen at last to be seen by him, and together they had built a life that no debt, no father, no cattle baron, no whispered story in a saloon, and no town gossip on a boardwalk would ever write for them again. Clara Whitmore Mercer lived a long life in the high country of Montana. She raised her brothers. She buried her father sober at 71. She taught 3 generations of women to read the papers the men around them had used to cage them. And when many years later, somebody asked her near the end what the one thing was she wanted folks to know about her life, she did not hesitate. She said it plain. I was a woman who was sold once. Clara Whitmore Mercer said, and I spent the rest of my days making sure no woman after me was ever sold again. That was the work. That was the whole of it, and I would do every single day of it over just the same, because that is the life I chose, and a life you choose is the only life that was ever really yours to begin with. And that in the end was the truth of it. Not sold, not saved, chosen and choosing to the very last breath.